Hi guys, I'm Bismit, uh, and today we are basically going to be discussing about CI/CD, and more specifically, we are going to be looking at how can we implement CI/CD on AWS using AWS as a platform. As for myself, I work as a software engineer at JP Morgan Chase, and we are going to look next at why and how static and where the CI/CD fall into the picture. So let's go ahead. What and why is CI/CD important? Because you want to merge your changes as quick as possible, and you also want to be able to run unit tests, and obviously you do not want to be breaking things in production. Uh, the difference between CI and CD is CI is more about integrating and merging the changes, whereas CD is more concerned with how do you actually ship and make your changes to the end user. So that is why we are going to be using CI/CD. Moving on ahead, we are going to be more specifically looking at 4 services on AWS. One of them is code commit, code build, code deploy, and code pipeline. Code commit is similar to your Git repo. So like you normally have a Git repo or a centralized repository when you are building things. That's what code commit does. And we are going to be looking at all these services individually. Then we have code build, which is basically used to build packages, run tests, and you want to be able to run tests as fast as possible and as quick as possible so that you can get any defects before they actually ship to your customer. Code pipeline basically allows you to create an end-to-end flow. So you can use various AWS services along with it. And code deploy is actually used because you don't just want to build and commit things, you also want to be able to deploy those things to the end customer as quick as possible. And you don't necessarily have to use all these services together. Like AWS provides you the flexibility that you can choose and pick which service do you actually want to use. So for example, you have your own Git repository, you can use that and integrate it. Looking at code commit in more detail, as I said, you can use the existing tools. You can consider notifications if you have your own custom webhook. You can do that as well if you want to send notifications when someone has committed a change. AWS allows you to use that as well. And of course, since it's a Git repository, you can always, it gives you a chance to collaborate with other developers on the code. Code build basically allows you to, you do not have to maintain your own build service anymore, and you can automate the process of testing. You just submit your build job to code build will spin up containers that basically they are going to run the tests that you specify, and then you get the results. That's as simple as code build gets. For code build as well, you can configure notifications and stuff. So for example, if the build fails and you want to trigger a notification or an alert that something is broken or something has not worked, you can do that here. Code pipeline is more about integrating like an end-to-end flow. So like water flows to a pipeline, right? So similarly, our code flows to a pipeline. So you commit the code, you build the code, and now let's say you want to add some approval steps, and you can also, if you have some on-prem system, you can integrate that. Code deploy allows you to automate the deployments. So if you want to have some specific types of deployment, like for example, you do not want to deploy to all machines at once, or you want to spin up some dev instances and you want to deploy to them before actually pushing them to production, you can do that here. Code deploy also allows you to do some sort of health monitoring and feedback. So in case something fails, you can always roll back to like the previous version of the build, and you can also deploy to containers using code deploy. You can also deploy to Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is basically a AWS managed service that we are going to be looking at in the example. Continuing on with deployments, you're basically be going to look at six. I hope this is visible. Yeah, six.
Is it visible?
Yellow is the ball.
Can I zoom in?
Yeah, only yellow is not visible.
Yeah.
Rest of the things are okay.
Next time you have to pass this to accessibility also. हाँ
Still not zooming in.
मेरे ख्याल से नया ने बनाई ना
But it's.
हाँ
मैंने उसको पूछ के डाला है.
नया को अभी लंदन में हो
I know.
हाँ हाउ यू नो
Twitter.
हाँ ओके
उसका tweet आया था तो मैं उसको पूछ लिया कि ये मेरे को इसमें काम आएगा. So basically we are going to be looking at six ways or six strategies that we can do deployment, and we also be going to be looking at when would you want to use which mode of deployment. So the simplest one is just all-at-once deployment. So as you can see from the example, we have 4 nodes running on version 1 of our application. We just break everything and we install version 2. Right? And this is going to be the mode of deployment mostly in our development environment. Right? So you want to be testing things. You want to be testing things as quickly as possible. Right? Of course, you are going to be having a lot of You are going to be having some downtime here because in the middle of those two swaps, you are going to be having those instances which are down. Right? This is, of course, as I said, great for quick iterations and developmental purposes. Then there is a rolling deployment. What rolling deployment means that you have these 4 instances in loop which are running on version 1. You do not take all of them down. You only set a bucket size, let's say 50%. You take 2 of them down. You install the new version on these 2 instances, and then you take these 2 versions down, these 2 instances down. These are down, and now you have like these 4 on the newer version. So in this example, this is giving you basically a 50% uptime, because at any point in time you have doing the version upgrade. At any point in time you have either these 2 instances down or these 2 instances down. Right? This is not going to incur you any additional cost, of course, because you are still using only 4 instances as you were using in the all-at-once deployment strategy. Where you are going to be actually incurring additional cost inside when you have rolling with additional batches. So rolling with additional batches is a scenario when you cannot actually afford downtime, right? So what do you do here? You have these 4 instances with version 1. Instead of touching these 4 instances, you launch 2 new instances with the newer version that you want to deploy. So now you have these 2 instances with version 2. So now you have 4 instances running. 2 are on version 2, 2 are on version 1. Now you can basically swap out these 2 instances, and now you have these 4 instances running version 1, and now you kill these 2 instances running version 2, and now you kill these 2 instances which were running version 1. So you actually incur an extra cost here because you have to spawn up 2 new additional instances in order to minimize the downtime. Do we have any questions here?
How are you all guys doing this? If you're in AWS, you have done this?
Yeah. So it depends really. Many of the multi-tenant applications, we generally spawn up new instances.
Okay.
Generally more to do with financial customers. They don't expect any downtime.
Yeah, so we will be actually going to the no downtime stage there.
So they basically would want that, there is absolutely no downtime. Even if there is a rollback happening, let's say at the end of the pipeline, they would not want that the V1, V2 should always be there, irrespective of if the new version is running, and that too at the same capacity if it is running earlier. So, yeah, this I think probably, but there are also clients which, especially newer clients, startup clients who don't want to put in too much money. We go with everything that is happening under development should also happen on the production. So it's all
Jai
just
Bajrang
go
Bali.
ahead, yeah. Deploy all 4 are gone, it's fine, but this is what we've done.
Cool.
So then we have the immutable strategy, the blue-green strategy, and the traffic splitting strategy. So what immutable means is you actually, at least in context of AWS, what immutable means you spawn a new auto-scaling group, and behind that auto-scaling group you have your virtual machine that it's a new auto-scaling group. So you create new EC2 instances and you launch your new version, that is V2, on those new instances. You monitor the health of those instances over time, and once you feel that okay, this was working, you can actually. So if you see this example, there are 4. You launch, as I said, you launch four new instances, and then you kill the. Once you monitor the health of these instances over time, you can basically remove the old one and you have the new one. That is the whole idea. So in this case, you are never, as long as these instances are healthy, you are actually going to have any downtime. So blue-green is kind of similar to immutable, but not exactly the same. So what do? We basically have 2 sets of instances, one of them running version 1, and you launch a new one which runs version 2, and you basically direct a percentage of the traffic to both instances, right? And what you do is you monitor the health of these instances over time, both of these environments, and once you feel that okay, the new version that you launch works, you basically do a CNAME swap. So what a CNAME swap means that you swap the URLs of those 2 instances, and no doubt the new one now points to the old one and the old one points to the new one. So basically the new one which you monitor that was healthy is now the live version. Traffic splitting is the right one, the last one. So traffic splitting, you mostly use it with Route 53. Route 53 is basically a DNS service inside AWS. And what traffic splitting does is you don't push the traffic all at once to the newer version. You basically set up increments. That okay, let's say every 10 minutes we push 5% additional traffic to the newer version, and we keep on doing this over time until we are satisfied that the health of the newer version that we are deploying is now satisfactory, and then since we have moved all the traffic, we can basically discard the old version. So, do we have any questions?
This is all EC2 instance based.
Sorry?
The traffic and the instances are EC2 instances.
Easy to integrate means?
EC2
instances. So you are actually, the traffic could be anywhere, right? It could be on EC2 instances, it could be on your ECS containers, it could be on your on-prem server. That does not matter. Because we are.
What are the strategies, and I think built Spinnaker kind of.
Sorry?
Spinnaker was a tool which had these similar
Istio with canary.
similar.
Yeah. So Kubernetes basically, when you go with more cloud native system like a Kubernetes, you will have tools like Spinnaker, you have tools like Istio, which will basically take care of your canary releases. So how do you want to push the new release to the clients? It's basically up to you, but it will depend on the traffic rather than the actual word.
So when you're asking me EC2, what is it? Or you're asking him, sorry,
Yeah,
EC2.
EC2
So the deployment target is what, or the build?
So I was wondering whether this is only for containers or it's also works this tool, because earlier, I mean, Spinnaker came out of Netflix, which was on AWS.
Yeah.
They use Spinnaker for these kind of.
You gave a talk on that also, if I'm not mistaken, on Spinnaker?
Long time.
Yeah, I remember you gave a talk. Oh, good. I got good memory. Okay.
But I feel, sir, this is right. But I think the only thing that we can mix with this is EC2 instances, because I don't think this will work efficiently with containers and Kubernetes. Because what you're doing is, see, at the end of the day, you're using Route 53. If you're having 2 containers with 2 different versions, then you'll also need 2 different load balancers.
Additional something.
So additional cost will come here. So I think EC2 is better for these, because then you're just managing or playing with the auto-scaling tools. But yeah.
No, I thought weighted routing and all, they primarily came out of service mesh and all those
Right.
kind of.
It is exactly opposite because these problems were increasing with the EC2 instances.
Right.
We got
Yeah.
in the container things.
Exactly.
You got a container thing because of these build issues or like deployment. That's why is it a deployment target or is like
It must.
so that's the point, right? Deployment target you'll have build issues actually not mean. Right? Build to हो जाएगा.
And I also have a very good story on the Blue-green. This we did a lot in the JP Morgan.
Oh, we want to hear, man. This is the real
Yeah,
stuff.
so we were the first team to implement this Blue-green kind of thing.
Okay.
And show off कर रहे थे सब जगह.
Uh-huh.
Blue-green.
ये अपना इंडिया का बस.
What happens with Blue-green is that when you do that swap, CNAME swap, URL swap, right? DNS क्या करता है? Cache करके रखता है IP address.
That can take a bit of time.
हमने स्वाप कर दिया एंड हमने बोला कि हमारे मैनेजर भाई चलाओ FI करो इट विल गो टू द हमने FI करा एंड इट सेड कि राउट डिड नॉट फाउंड
तो सब रेड दिख रहे.
There is blue, green, and red.
Yeah.
yeah so I mean with all these strategies there are certain caveats which
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
we need to discover early when doing it.
So that's a great thing of being a first team. तू pioneer है भाई.
And there is one more strategy actually, canary deployment, which I don't know, will you be covering it later on?
Sorry?
Canary deployments.
The canary deployment is only for, I mean, I can talk about it. It's kind of similar to traffic splitting. Like you can actually, you can have like 10% traffic going every 10 minutes, or you can have it in linear fashion. So you put 5% now, then 5 minutes later you put more 5%, then 15 minutes later you put more 5%. That is basically canary deployment.
Yeah, so we used to do in a slightly different use case. So we used to manage Kubernetes clusters within JP Morgan, huge clusters like 16 or 32 node. So if we want to bump up the version, we cannot ask people to get out of those clusters. So certain clusters, मतलब पीछे से चुपके से we used to bump up Kubernetes on that.
Okay.
And those we used to treat as a canary.
Okay.
So अगर 2 हफ्ते तक there are no tickets raised, then we will
This should be some development, no ticket development. चलो.
Again, credits to Neha. So as you already saw,
Okay, go ahead. We are in a small room. These people will come here and do.
we already saw all the deployment modes. The only concern is how do you decide on what factors do you actually come up with which deployment mode do you want to use. So the main factor is of course the cost, because when you spawn up additional instances or containers, you are going to be bearing an additional cost for the time those things are running. The next concern would be, I will put this above cost, downtime, because as you said that there are instances where you cannot afford even a minute of downtime, right? So you cannot do a all-at-once deployment in that scenario. You also want to have some sort of rollback mechanism. So the time that it takes to roll back can vary between each type of deployment. So for all-at-once deployment, if I want to roll back, I will have to kill all these instances and then install these versions once again, which is not what I want it to be. But if I wanted to roll back here, it would be very easy because these 4 were already running. So I just kill this and I could roll back. The use cases, of course, for dev, you could definitely do an all-at-once deployment because developers do not care about downtime.
Speak for yourself.
The ops guy cares about downtime, so we cannot do it all at once. And of course, there are some additional components that come in the picture, that how many extra instances do you want to launch, what is the percentage of canary traffic shifting that you want to do, if you are doing a rolling with additional batches, what is the percentage of additional instances that you want to launch, and most importantly, you want to do some sort of health monitoring. because you want to know whether the version you launched actually worked or not. So visually implementing, that can basically two things. Either you launch, this is basically like you just swap the instance, or you have something in the middle and this takes this down and then you launch the new instance, right? These are the basics around deployment. Before we go to a demo, do we have anything to ask?
Which one is most widely used?
Which widely used?
Which is the most used in production?
Okay.
It depends.
Depends on what level you, which.
I think mostly blue-green is standard. If you talk about rolling deployment, instinctively blue-green other than
For me, rollback is more important.
Sorry?
For me, rollback factor is more important. So which one should I choose?
So if rollback is important, you can, if you look at this, you can't roll back here.
It's in a production.
You can't roll back. You can roll back here, but it's going to take certainly more time. So the easiest way to roll back would be to do an immutable deployment, right? Because you have an additional set of instances, and like if I take this down, you have that left.
In this immutable, how does the traffic go to the remaining four, or the four are just like they are just sitting idle?
Sorry, I didn't get a question.
Like in the immutable one, right? So how does
Leon, just speak a bit loud.
in the immutable one, how does the traffic get split? Like are those four? just
So you actually have a load balancer in front of it,
okay.
right? You actually have a load balancer in front of it, and the load balancer can now knows the IP addresses of both of these auto scaling groups, and it can redirect traffic to both of these auto scaling groups. And the load balancer also has a health check point, so that in case if this new deployment doesn't work out, you can always work on the old version.
Any follow up?
Apple ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's like Apple ecosystem.
I don't touch
Because of
Apple.
AWS, you get all the benefits of load balancers, health checks.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Any more further questions?
We're going to be looking at a very simple example. So I had to create this repository here because Git no longer works,
Okay.
but that's okay. What we are going to be building, we are going to be creating a simple pipeline using AWS, and we'll intentionally be creating a failure so that during the build process we can see like if something fails, and we'll also be looking at the logs. That's important. So we already have this code commit repository. What we are going to do now is basically create a build project. And build project basically use a config file which is buildspec.yaml. In this buildspec.yaml we have a very simple test case which basically it's trying to grep for congratulations on this index.html page. So if this grep fails, the build will fail.
How much is this delta with Kubernetes artifacts? I mean, suppose you come from a Kubernetes background or any of the open source CNCF, and then you have to learn this template. I mean, this would be having its own schema, right?
So this is like every CI/CD pipeline has their own YAML file that you have to.
YAML, I mean schema.
Yeah.
Basically,
anything,
yeah.
Like Git
So how
patterns.
different is if you're coming like from an open source CNCF kind of thing? How much is the learning that you need to? Have you seen that?
For all there is like you have.
How much is the learning? There's already some learning. There's no
Depends
doubt.
on the documentation. How good is the documentation?
Okay.
Like,
It's
if
like
GitLab
somewhat
has.
similar to the GitHub Actions volume file.
Yeah, like I would say easiest one is probably GitHub Action because they have got a lot of pre-built modules. So you just put the line and you get the action. But
Okay.
it's more of like a lot of abstraction. So anything breaks, then you have to again sit and
Okay.
figure out where it is going wrong. Yeah.
So I think this anyways you have to learn whether or not Kubernetes. Because
No, I'm just looking at how if you look at Docker file, there is this format.
Actually, the versions differ from vendor to vendor. If you are for example, when I configured my JetBrains ID, the IntelliJ one, I installed the Azure and the Red Hat one. all at once. So these two started suddenly
Conflicting.
Conflicting. And I'm wondering what is going wrong. So basically, the versions were different. That's what basically.
We are going to be creating a simple code build project. We need to select the repository that has our code, which is a branch, which is an operating system. The important part is this.
ChatGPT can help you to learn. The other day we just showed ChatGPT create a Terraform for storage account.
Oh. Secret भी आया क्या?
रियलिटी है इसके ऊपर हमारी ये मैं जिस यूनिवर्सिटी में किया था उसमें ससेक्स में वो तो उसी वक्त कर रहे थे ये वॉइस से प्रोग्रामिंग करना अभी तो काफी एडवांस स्टेजेस में है उसको ये रियलिटी हो चुकी है.
But I would say like last nine if you take and if you're looking at it as a company and what you're giving as a DevOps, so if you're how you're connecting with the code commit part, the code deployment part, and how.
So we don't do anything of this. So basically we do outside in observability.
Okay.
Like you don't have to install any agent, you don't have to install any library.
But suppose if there's an error you've got an error, some outage, but it's actually because of code or configuration.
Yeah.
One of the two you can have, right? So how will that come feedback? Are you looking at the code or the repository or the config?
So that either the user will have to feed it as an event.
Okay.
Into the system. Or
User will have to feed or like the connecting happening?
Or will via some integration. But we don't support that right now because generally what happens is that at least what we have seen with our customers is that the deployments are quite known. So if they see any abnormality in the traffic or in the data pattern, then they relate it to some event that is happening.
You would have logs, right? You're talking about errors and.
Sometimes if you look at it, some errors, even though it's code, it only comes because of load. Okay? I mean they will pass through.
Correct.
कुछ नहीं बराबर चल रहा है लेकिन एक महीने बाद just before अरे टक फेल हो रहा है and that is that thing अरे उसका memory कुछ ज़्यादा ले रहा है.
IPL, like game play. So before the start of the game, you will see a surge in traffic and so on. But generally the users are aware of that traffic, aware of the pattern. So
Okay.
spotting the like for me it will be hard to spot an abnormality in someone else's traffic. But for a user, they will be able to spot.
अभी कोई टूल आजकल के तो टूल्स में वो कलर कोडिंग कुछ आ गई है इनकी वो उसमें बता देते हैं कि ये कलर कोड आ गया तो ये इस टाइप ये ब्रैकेट में जा रहा है आपका.
हाँ?
पहले था वो एक पीएचडी का विषय है पूरा आज भी लॉग एरर को पढ़ना.
We are going to have to select a service role. This is important because what this will allow, going to allow code build to do, it's going to actually give code build the permissions to pull the code from code deploy.
Okay.
Right? So this is a role which I already created, build demo service. You can either create a new role or use an existing one. This is a build spec file that I mentioned earlier. So by default, AWS expects you to have a build spec.yaml file. We already saw that. And this is important because I've enabled cloud logs. This is basically going to allow us to see the logs. No matter if the build fails, if you can actually come here and see why the build failed. We can also upload them to S3 from a retention perspective. So now we have the code commit, we have the code build. What we are going to now looking at is the code pipeline. Let's go into the code pipeline. The same thing comes here once again. So as far as AWS is concerned, every service needs to have a specific set of permission in order to communicate to other services. We had this whole thing for code build as well. We have the same thing for code pipeline. Good. So now we need to fill in the steps for this code pipeline. So for code pipeline, the first step would be it needs to have the code. So that starts from the code commit. Next we need a build provider. So in this case, we have already set up a code build project, so we could be using that. But if you are using something external, you can also add Jenkins in here.
So only Jenkins is the external we can add, huh?
So right now it only supports code build and Jenkins.
Okay. When you say Jenkins, is like what?
CI/CD tool.
No, it's here, but no, like where it is, like is on the AS or like anywhere else. If I'm on my on-premise,
Yeah, you
so
can connect it to on-premise. So we have a bunch of deployment providers available now. We have discussed about Code Deploy, but we could also go ahead and use ECL, which is basically the containers, Elastic Container Service. You could also use Elastic Beanstalk, which we are going to use in this scenario. Elastic Beanstalk is basically a managed service by AWS. It provides a lot of easy to use services like load balancing. It sets up a database for you. It sets up a monitoring thing for you. So we are going to be using Elastic Beanstalk in this scenario. I've already set up an application, and I've set up two environments inside the Elastic Beanstalk application. There is a test environment and there is a prod environment. And right now we'll see the test environment, and we'll be deploying to this test environment. And so now we can see that the pipeline is in progress. The time is incorrect for some reason, but that's okay. And what's going to happen here at some point that since this has succeeded, it's going to go to a build, and we have intentionally failed the build for that congratulations check, and eventually the build is going to fail. Since we have to wait for a while, do we have any questions in the meanwhile?
yeah, it's a good time to ask questions.
So we are not using Code Deploy here. We have not created a separate Code Deploy project.
Sorry, can you be louder?
We have not created a separate Code Deploy project here.
I have not used Code Deploy. I have used Elastic Beanstalk instead, because Code Deploy would need me to create a role once again, and then I would have to create a role on my EC2 instance here to pull from that SD bucket, and that would be a little. So that's exactly what we expected. Our build has failed, and
Can you expand this? Why it is? What is the reason it's giving out? No, I just want to read the error also. Maybe even others want to read.
So if it's in this specific line, it says that the command did not exist successfully because it could not find the congratulation inside our index.html page. Right? I mean, this is a very simple example, but if you are running this in a live environment, it will help you to catch errors much quicker. What we can do is we can go back to code commit and we'll fix the file. And now, since I just committed the changes, my pipeline is once again in progress, and this is automatically now going to trigger rebuild of the change that I made. And if the build succeeds, which I hope it does, this is then going to go into my Elastic Beanstalk environment and deploy the application. So the environment that we are deploying to is this one. This is the existing version. before our deployment, and we'll have some changes here once the build succeeds.
Okay. So how much of this is done like on the terminal and with CI/CD tools? I mean, this is now doing on portal, right? I mean, usually teams don't really go by the portal way, right? They will try to do somewhere on the terminal or programmatically or something like that.
So you can actually, the build has succeeded, but you can actually go via the SDK as well. Like you don't need to
The CDK and all, dude?
Yeah, so AWS has a SDK for your language specific things.
They also have that CLI thing.
As AWS CLI, right?
Yeah.
That also
Yeah,
helps.
but you have the CLI and you also have the CDK, which is the Cloud Development Kit.
That's what I said, CDK is there.
CLI is a bit, you have to do little work on getting stuff out of it.
Yeah, but programmatically, if you're going to deploy on a production basis, you will do that, right? Portal तो कभी कभी
प्लगइन्स भी इन्होंने बनाए हैं लेकिन आज भी टीडीएस है.
हाँ?
प्लगइन्स भी इन्होंने बनाए हैं सब एक्स्ट्रा बाकी के डेवलपर्स ने एक्सटर्नल टू द AWS वेंडर्स इन फैक्ट.
हाँ.
लेकिन ये आज भी टीडीएस है वो मैटर जो आप बोल रहे हैं टर्मिनल पे ये काम करना सारा.
But this is one time activity.
Yeah.
Pipeline you will create only once.
But the problem is, you have to also make sure, like, when you're coming into this ecosystem, like he rightly said, there is a service role for each of these, right? So if you're planning to do complete automation on your environments, so when you start with, let's say, a tool like Terraform, you'll also make sure that that role is already created through Terraform. Because then, suddenly when you come to CLI, so we've had cases wherein we've actually automated the code build itself. The entire pipeline was created through Terraform. And the place where it got stuck is of course the service role. So again we have to go back to Terraform, create those roles initially with IAM or whatever plugins they are using or any other tool for that matter instead of Terraform. So that is the kind of tediousness which I think he's talking about. There's a lot of things that you need to take care of when you're going with CLI. If you are a user in AWS, it is fairly easy to run a CLI command and say, or if these things exist. But if this is the automation that you want, the thing that he did from UI, if you want to automate that, then it is a bigger challenge because then you have to, encompass everything that is surrounding or used by AWS within AWS, etc. And this will stand for all other cloud providers.
Yeah, it's like a lot of details in the UI, like service role and IAM permissions and IAM stuff is all abstracted.
Okay.
So when you go
What
via
happens
tools,
is the link between the text editor and the command line itself becomes like typing that terminal.
Okay.
So each time you alter something, you have to add those text files or YAML files or whatever the configuration files they are.
Our deployment is even though the build has succeeded, we could look at the log and fix it. But this does give us an idea of like if this was a real thing that we were building upon, we would not actually end up deploying a version that will fail in the future. And we can obviously look at the log, which I don't want to do now.
No, we should look at the logs. क्यों fail हुआ देखना चाहिए ना?
Okay.
how should we?
हाँ.
Yeah, okay.
This is the session for that only. We love failures. क्या error message है?
Probably doesn't have
So it's actually saying that it could not find the S3 bucket that has the build artifact. So if you look at this, it's actually saying that the S3 bucket that the build is writing to it cannot be read by the process that the code deploy is trying to read from.
Okay.
Okay, so saying that the artifact at the Amazon S3 bucket could not be found and it's pointing to the particular bucket. So,
Why can't find it? Service role?
So most probably I use predefined roles, so there is a possibility that this has access to a different S3 bucket and that is writing to a different S3 bucket.
Brilliant. Chalo.
What that mean? So I think that's it from my side.
Okay. Any further question for Bismith? Okay.
Here,